Well, you were one of those very few Republicans, a shrinking group of Republicans that was sort of caught in the middle in a way, in that you were one of the what some think, at least at the moment in our history, is a dying breed of moderate Republicans because so many of them were defeated, excuse me, in the 2006 election. How difficult did your own party make it for you to be a moderate? I'm thinking, for example, that as early as the beginning of the Republican majority, you were interested in a leadership position, but were not allowed to play that role because you supported abortion rights and some gun control.
Well, yeah, I had voted for a gun control bill. I don't think that was definitive. A lot of Republicans ended up voting for that. That was caused me some problems at home in my district, but I don't think that was a problem internally. But clearly the abortion issue is a critical issue. It's kind of a dividing line, as it has been at least until now. It'll be interesting to see in the 110th Congress whether the Democrats change on that. Democrats have even been more one-sided on that. You'll recall that they never would allow Governor Casey to speak at the Democratic convention, for example, because he was pro-life. And whereas you had pro-choice people speaking at the Republican convention, they were basically banned from speaking at the Democratic convention. So they've been very one-sided on that issue. I am pro-choice, but I think of it, I am moderate. I don't mind using that term. I think of myself as a moderate, as a centrist. I think of myself as a practical person. I try to look at issues and see what I think is the right solution, what is going to work best. I sometimes look wistfully at some of my colleagues who see everything in simple black and white terms and say, life would sure be easier if I thought everything was that way. I would have no problem making up my mind about anything, but I don't think life is that way. But the truth is, I see myself coming from the libertarian side of the Republican Party, the Barry Goldwater side, and that's kind of where we are in Arizona on those issues. Where we come from that, where the idea that government ought to stay out of your lives. I've always found it fascinating that my Republican colleagues think that government is bad and we should have smaller government, less intrusion of government, reduce spending and everything, except when we get to the issues of your personal life and what in the bedroom, and then they want government to intrude there. My Democratic friends on the other side think that's a terrible idea, that government should not intrude in that kind of thing, but they want the government to make all the decisions for your family about the education of their kids, about their health care, about their economic lives and everything else there. So I find on the broader questions, I'm more in touch with where the Republicans are, which is why I'm a Republican. Fiscal issues, those kinds of other things, economic issues, and foreign policy. But I do think that both sides tend to have this view that that government should play a role somewhere where I don't think it should. So I think I'm consistent in my views.
But has it gotten increasingly difficult for somebody with your views, a moderate, to be comfortable inside your own party?
Well, I don't have any trouble feeling comfortable within my party, but yes, it's certainly in the last 4, 6, 8 years, certainly since 1994, and even increasingly since then, the numbers in the Republican ranks who have been social conservatives. I mean, Bush really made that, and Karl Rove really decided this is the way we're going to keep the majority, and we're going to get the majority and keep it and get elected here is by emphasizing the social issues and keeping that base, building that base there. I think that philosophy or that approach came home to roost this year, and it didn't work. Obviously, it didn't work this year, and I think it didn't work because they just played it too long and too strongly, and I just don't think that you can do it. I'm not uncomfortable within the party, but there's fewer and fewer of us. I mean, it's incredible to think that in the 110th Congress, Chris Shays will be the only Republican representative from New England, the only in the entire 5-state region. He'll be the only Republican left in that entire region. So the party is becoming a Southern-based and Western-based party, and we're losing, except for, of course, the West Coast, which is not in the Republican, but mountain states, prairie states, and Southern-based. We're losing the industrial Midwest. We've lost the Northeast completely, and we've pretty much lost the West Coast.
When you looked at the exit polls out of the 2006 election, you saw that people wanted, their number one issue was ethical reform in more or less, in not exactly those terms, but roughly those terms. They wanted a cleaner Congress, not that they necessarily think they're taking money, but there certainly is a sense that there's a corruption, however you might define that, is on the rise. In your years in Congress, did you see an increase in what some would describe as corruption, although that may be too strong a term?
No, I did not. I do not think there has been an increase in corruption within Congress. I mean, you go back to Abscam in 1980, that involved a whole mess of congressmen. There have been some very high-profile individuals, excuse me, some very high-profile individuals that have gotten a lot of attention, whether it's been Duke Cunningham or Bill Jefferson and Kurt Weldon and some others. But I don't think there has been a great increase in corruption in Congress. I really think that the vast majority of members of Congress are good people trying to do the right thing and are trying to do it as honestly as they possibly can. The laws have gotten so incredibly complicated now that anybody can play the game of gotcha if they want to. They can always find something. Just the filing of your financial reports takes me weeks and weeks to put together, and somebody can always find something in there that I missed or didn't get in there if they want to find that. But that's not corruption, and that's not what you were implying, and I don't think that's what most of the public doesn't think that's corruption either. But in general, no, I don't think there's been a rise in corruption.
And ethical standards are roughly what they've always been?
I think ethical standards are good. As I said, I think where we fall down is in the way we treat each other.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's move to a couple of issues, because we want to be sure that we get into all of the many issues in which you played a big role in the Congress. And number one, I think in the minds of many people, is immigration. Because you really were for so many years, and I guess kind of left in the same state, a voice in the wilderness on immigration reform, arguing that it had to be a multi-pronged approach with the guest worker program, and some acknowledgement that, at least from your point of view, that that illegal immigrants are going to continue to come in from Mexico. And the reaction was very strongly in your party that the only solution is to build a fence, maybe build a wall, do whatever can be done to keep people out. First of all, why do you think that there is this, this sharp division within your own party? And by that I mean, what are the forces at play here in your party on that issue that are pressuring members one way or the other?
Whew. Well, how much, we could go on all afternoon on this one issue alone there. I'm not a lonely voice within the party. I mean, President Bush is where we are. You had Senator McCain, who introduced the same bill that Congressman Flake and I introduced in the House. He introduced with Senator Kennedy.
I guess what I mean is yours has been one of the loudest voices.
It's been one of the loudest voices in the House,
yeah.
Absolutely, that's true. Senator McCain has been a very outspoken person in the United States. Senator Specter and others have been outspoken on this. So it's not that we're lonely, but we've clearly been in a minority in the House of Representatives. The rules, of course, and the procedures in the House are such that the leadership, once they make up their mind, they can pretty much block anything from being considered that they don't want. We went to the leadership and asked, when we did the immigration debate in December of 2005, we said, let us offer the Kolbe Flake Gutierrez bill as a substitute for that. They didn't allow, the Rules Committee did not allow that to be made in order, which means the Speaker decided not to make that in order there. So we were not allowed to have that kind of a debate on it. And we had a debate, I don't know whether it would have passed, but we would have had a good, healthy vote for that kind of approach with with most of the Democrats voting for it. What are the forces that are, your question was, what are the forces that are at work among Republicans that make them do this? React the way that they do. I think it's like it's on so many issues. It's a strident, outspoken, small number of people who are frustrated, and I have them in my district. I have my brother, who's 6 years older than I am, who writes me nasty letters all the time on this issue. He lives about 5 miles from the border, and he's constantly being inundated with illegal aliens coming through his property and damaging things, and he wants something done now. And that's all that they just say, stop it. We just want you to stop it. You can talk about all your other things after you stop them from coming across. But that's like saying, I'll be for drug rehabilitation after we stop the sale of drugs. It's not a very practical approach to it. But I think people are simply frustrated with it. But that's always been the case along the border, or more recently in Arizona. There's a number of things that are at work here. It's hard to know how to even start the answers. I'll try to make it very brief. But what happened in the 1990s, when we hardened the border in places like San Diego and El Paso, we funneled them all into Arizona. And it caused this tremendous surge of undocumented people coming across the border into Arizona. In fact, today, almost 50% of all the apprehensions of people on the southern border are in my district in Arizona. So it's just this like a funnel of all these people coming through. People were really frustrated by that, and that's what made this such a big issue in my area and elsewhere along the border. But why is it an issue in Peoria, Illinois, as well as it is in Patagonia, Arizona, in my district? And the answer to that is, ironically, as we've hardened the border and made it more difficult for people to get across the border, they're coming and they're staying longer. So they used to come, they would work, and then they'd go back home. Then they'd come back for the next growing season or the next construction season or the next hospitality season, hotel season. They would come back and then kept going back and home. No, they're not doing that anymore. They're coming and they're staying, they're saving their pennies, and they're bringing their families up here. So instead of 5 guys living quietly in a one-bedroom apartment and going back to Mexico or Honduras or Salvador, wherever it might be, they're now, each of them has their family there. The mothers are taking the kids to the hospital when they have an earache or a runny nose, because that's the only health care they can have access to is the emergency room, and they're all enrolled in the schools, and they're in the malls on Saturday and Sunday. And suddenly the folks in Peoria are saying, who are all these people with these strange smelling food and strange voices they're talking here that we've never seen around here before? And I think that is the main reason why this has become such a big issue. And people culturally feel threatened by this. They feel threatened, they feel jobs are threatened, and they feel culturally threatened by this.
Well, you've said that this is a defining issue for the Republican Party.
I think it is.
What do you mean by that?
I think it's a defining issue because the Republican Party has been built, and this country has been built on immigration. We have accepted and absorbed different groups, whether it's been the Irish, whether it's been the Hispanics, whether it's been the Chinese, most recently the Vietnamese before the Hispanic numbers came in. We've absorbed those people into our society and into the Republican Party. And if we're going to turn our backs on the Hispanic minority, which is now the largest minority in the United States, we will guarantee that we are a minority party for at least another generation. That's already happened in California. Governor Wilson in Prop 187 did exactly that, destroyed the Republican Party in California. And if we do this nationally, we will be a minority for a long time to come. You could see it in this election. 2004, Bush got over 40%, about 42% of the Hispanic vote. We dropped down to 25% in this election. That's a huge difference when you're talking about this minority. People don't remember, but until 1932, till Roosevelt came, the handful of African Americans, blacks that could vote, were Republicans because they'd been emancipated by Abraham Lincoln, a Republican. He captured that vote, and it's captured yet today, 60 years later.
Why is this such a difficult issue for Congress? This goes into the area that we've been studying in this project. We're taking a look at how well Congress is able to make policy that will be effective in the future. And I don't mean 20 years from now. Obviously, you have to keep revisiting these things. I mean even 5 years from now. This seems to be one of those issues that must be dealt with, that addresses a problem which is only going to continue to grow, and which Congress seems to be, that seems to paralyze Congress when looking at it.
So your question is, why are we unable to deal with this issue? I think it is because the answer requires some leadership on the part of members of Congress and the leadership in Congress. It requires a little bit of being brave, like Social Security reform, another thing that I've stepped out front on. It requires stepping out front on that kind of thing. And members would rather say, no, let me just respond to the people at home. The issue did not turn out to be a deciding issue in virtually any election. The hardcore anti-immigration people did not win in this election, or they either lost or they won, but they didn't win because of this. Their margins were reduced. So I think that it is proven that we did not succeed with this issue by using this issue that way. But I think it is because it is what we hear from our constituents, I can guarantee you when the immigration bill was up, the only people I heard from were those that said, you know, stop them at the border, close the border. I don't care about anything else that you do. Just stop those people from coming in today.
And finally, on this subject, what kind of leadership do you think that President Bush offered on this issue?
Well, on this issue, I think his leadership was good. I'd give him a B or a B minus on it, I guess. I think it was pretty good, but it was certainly better than he gave on Social Security, for example, or some other areas. He was pretty strong about it, but I think he could have gone out and brought in the leadership and said, knock this stuff off, this crap you're doing up there on Capitol Hill of telling people that we're just going to stop them at the border, build this kind of wall. He signed the bill, for heaven's sakes, to allow the wall to be built. I mean, everybody knows it's a joke. It's not going to be funded. It's never going to happen. But he signed this bill to do that. He should have said no. He should have vetoed that and made that a stand and said, this is the wrong approach to this. I call on Congress to come up with a more responsible approach that deals with all the aspects of this thing. He just couldn't bring himself to do that. But he's been a much better leader on this than anybody else in the Republican Party, and frankly, anybody in the Democratic Party. Although the Democrats pretty much line up on the side of a comprehensive approach. You have labor unions which are over here that don't believe there should be any kind of guest worker program. They don't like guest workers. So the Democrats have been very quiet on this issue, and they haven't led on this issue either.